The train was late. Or perhaps it wasn't. Time blurred when the cold set into your bones like it meant to stay. The nurse sat still on the edge of the station bench, her gloved hands folded tightly in her lap, a cracked leather satchel by her boots. A sign creaked overhead in the wind, Willow Pass Station, but no one waited with her anymore. Those who had arrived had long since been claimed by husbands, cousins, employers, the lucky. She was not among the lucky. A thin shawl clung to her shoulders, the wool long surrendered to the bitter Wyoming air. Her cheeks, once flushed with youth, now carried the pale blue tint of fatigue. She blinked slowly, as if each time she opened her eyes, the world might have changed, might have turned merciful. It hadn't. Behind her, the depot's wood slats groaned in the wind. A door banged open and shut. No one offered help. No one asked her name. A man with a crooked hat had tipped his head earlier, only to mutter something crude when she didn't smile back. She was a nurse, not a bride. She'd come west on promise, a telegram offering a clinic post in a growing town. But the telegram lied. The doctor died before she arrived, and with him, the job. The town had no use for another mouth to feed, no matter how many wounds she'd sewn shut on muddy battlefields. She had no home, no family left to write. All she had now was her satchel, a pair of cracked boots, and a weariness that curled around her ribs like something living. Snow began to fall again, slow and silent, soft as ash. She watched it drift through the gaslight above, each flake catching the yellow glow like it had a soul. Her fingers trembled. She tucked them under her arms and tried not to shiver. The wind changed. Sharper now. It knifed beneath her shawl, through the folds of her skirt. She stood, uncertain why, and paced the platform once, twice. A station boy eyed her from the corner with suspicion. She lowered her gaze. She knew that look, the kind men gave women who lingered too long in public places. As if silence made them guilty. The sky was bleeding now. Pink, then violet, then gray. Another night, and she had no place to go. She sat again. This time, her bones protested. The bench was frozen through. She leaned back and exhaled slowly, watching the breath rise like smoke. Her eyes closed. Sleep came like surrender, slow, heavy, unwanted. The kind that doesn't ask your permission. Just slips over your shoulders and hums lullabies you heard as a child. Her thoughts grew soft. Her grip loosened. She dreamed of warmth, of fireplaces and quilts, of her brother humming near the hearth, of her husband brushing snow from his collar as he stepped inside the door. She'd lost both in the war. Letters came folded like wings, carrying only condolences and stamps. Something shifted. The cold grew distant. A low jingle, like rains. Then footsteps. Not hurried, certain. A voice murmured nearby, low and steady, speaking to a horse maybe, or to no one. A shape crouched beside her. She didn't open her eyes, but she felt it, the presence of someone who didn't intend harm. Rough hands lifted her gently, arms firm but careful beneath her back. Her head fell against a thick coat, and for the first time in days, her skin pressed against something warm. She stirred. A whisper of protest caught in her throat, but it faded when the coat wrapped around her like a promise. The sleigh creaked as her weight was placed upon it. She felt the horse shift, the sound of hooves on packed snow. A thick wool blanket, she knew the texture even in her fading mind, was drawn over her legs. The man said nothing. No explanations. No introductions. Just silence. She opened her eyes once, barely, and caught only the shape of him, a broad silhouette in the dusk, a brimmed hat dusted with snow, the glint of a lantern in his hand. His face was half-shadowed, beard rough along his jaw, mouth set not in coldness but in calm. He looked at her, not in pity, not in possession, but in recognition. Like he'd seen something like her before. Maybe in himself. She closed her eyes again, the sway of the sleigh rocking her slowly, her heart fluttering like a bird too long caged. The sleigh moved forward. Behind them, the station disappeared into night. Only the lantern swung gently on the back rail, casting a golden arc over the snow-covered road. She didn't know where he was taking her. Didn't ask. All she knew was she wasn't cold anymore. Not on the outside. And not entirely on the inside either. He guided the sleigh through dark pines, their tall limbs heavy with snow, the horse's breath rising in soft white plumes. Around them, the world held its breath. No wind. No howling wolves. Just the steady crunch of hooves and the slow rhythm of something beginning. She thought of asking his name, but the words felt too fragile. Better to wait. Better to see if this was real, or just the kindness of a dream. But he turned his head slightly toward her, as if sensing her thought. Then, gently, quietly, he spoke. You looked like someone who shouldn't be left behind. And with that, she wept. Soundless, in the dark. Not from fear. Not from sorrow. But from the unbearable tenderness of being seen, truly seen, after so long alone. She wrapped his coat tighter around herself. His scent, pine, leather, a hint of tobacco, wrapped around her like memory. She didn't know yet that the man beside her had once built railroads with his own hands, lost everything in a flood, and come back with more land than he ever wanted. She didn't know he'd buried a wife, turned his back on townsfolk, and learned to love silence more than speech. She didn't know she would come to change everything. But as the sleigh rounded a bend and a light flickered in the distance, a house, waiting, something inside her stirred. Not hope. Not yet. But the space where hope might grow. The bed was softer than anything she remembered, not in cushion, but in intention. The sheets smelled of lavender and smoke, the kind of scent that clings to a house with long memories and few visitors. She blinked into the warm light, her body wrapped in wool and quiet. A fire cracked in the hearth across the room. Somewhere below, a clock ticked, slow and steady, like a heart that had learned patience. She sat up slowly, the ache in her limbs dulled by rest. Her fingers, no longer blue, flexed against the blanket. Someone had removed her boots, washed the grime from her hands. A glass of water stood on the bedside table. Next to it, a folded note. When you're strong enough, the door will be open. See, asterisk asterisk. She ran her thumb over the letter's edge. The script was neat, deliberate. Not romantic, not hurried. Just a line that held space for her, without asking for anything in return. She rose carefully. Her legs trembled, but held. Her satchel rested at the foot of the bed, untouched. The door creaked open under her palm, and the hallway beyond was long and wooden, lined with old portraits and coats hung neatly on pegs. No lace curtains. No flowers in vases. Just sunlight slicing through the windows and beams thick with dust. She followed the scent of something warm, stew, maybe, or cornbread, into a broad kitchen with stone floors and a stove humming low. A woman stood with her back turned, gray hair pinned in a twist, ladling broth into a bowl. You're up, the woman said without looking. Figured you would be. She turned, face weathered but kind, her eyes the color of pale milk. She set the bowl down on the table. Sit. Eat. You look like you've had the war stomp through you. I have, the nurse replied, easing into the chair. Her voice cracked. She hadn't spoken aloud in days. The woman nodded, unsurprised. Name's Hester. Been here since the floors were dirt and the roof leaked like a sinner's alibi. That man who brought you in, he don't say much, but he sees too much. You'll find that out soon enough. She didn't ask his name. Didn't need to. He wasn't the kind of man whose story started with introductions. For 3 days she stayed indoors, sipping broth, folding linens, regaining her strength beneath windows that framed wide, endless fields. From the porch, the ranch sprawled out like a painting, fences and pasture land, stables in the distance, the mountains crouching behind them like old giants. It was land tended by hard hands and quiet pride. She watched him from the parlor once, out by the corral, a leather glove perched on one hip as he spoke to a stable boy. His coat flared in the wind, his hat pulled low. She noticed how the horses didn't flinch when he moved. How his voice, though she couldn't hear it, made even the wind pause. He came in that evening without a word. Removed his hat. nodded at her with eyes that held neither question nor expectation. Just acknowledgement. As if to say, *, you're here. You're safe. That's enough, *. Over supper, Hester did most of the talking. The nurse learned the ranch was called White Hollow, that it stretched farther than any map claimed, and that its owner had once ridden cattle through a snowstorm just to bring back a calf with a broken leg. The man didn't confirm or deny the tale. He just broke his bread and listened. That night, the nurse returned to her room, the silence heavy with something not empty, but waiting. Like a letter half-written. By the end of the week, she asked for work. She couldn't abide idleness, not with her hands healed and her soul restless. Hester set her to mending curtains, organizing the larder. Then came the animals. A goat with a limp. A hawk with a clipped wing the cowboy had found in the woods. An aging mule named Sorrel who wheezed with every breath. "You've a way with creatures," Hester said, watching her bandage the hawk's wing with gentle precision. "I think they just know I don't expect them to perform." One morning, a ranch hand named Jasper knocked on her door with a cane in one hand and a sheepish grin in the other. "Boss says the calf's got a cough. Could use your eye, miss." She followed him to the barn, the wind tugging at her shawl. Inside, the cowboy stood beside the stall, arms folded, the sick calf lying quiet in hay. When he looked at her, something shifted, not in his face, but in the space between them. Recognition again? Or perhaps gratitude in its purest, wordless form. "She's not fevered," the nurse murmured, placing a hand gently on the calf's neck. "Just cold and scared. She won't eat. She will when she feels like she belongs again." The cowboy tilted his head slightly. Same could be said of people. The sentence floated there, delicate and sharp. She didn't respond. Just pressed a blanket tighter around the calf and stood. That evening, he left a kettle on the hearth with 2 cups beside it. She poured one and sat across from him by the fire. The warmth between them grew not from touch, but from the absence of demand. They didn't speak of the past. Didn't speak of futures. They spoke of the way snow falls heavier on cedar trees. Of horses that sleep standing up. Of the kind of tired that doesn't leave, even after sleep. She found herself watching his hands as he spoke, large, scarred, yet careful. The hands of a man who had both lost and built. He asked her nothing of her war, nor her dead. That, more than anything, made her want to stay. One night, as she folded blankets in the quiet room beneath the stairs, Hester stepped close and whispered, "He's not the kind to say things twice. If he tells you you're welcome, he means it." The nurse nodded, heart caught somewhere between caution and hope. She returned to her room, drew the curtains, and knelt by the window. Outside, the moon spilled silver over the fields. And in the barn, she saw him, the cowboy, sitting beside the calf, humming low, like a father with no words left but melody. She didn't sleep that night. Not because of fear. But because, for the first time in years, she was beginning to wonder what it would cost to hope again. Spring arrived as a whisper before it ever dared to speak. The snow melted slow and secretive, soaking into earth still stiff with memory. Buds pressed from brittle branches, not bold but brave. And the nurse, though she didn't call herself that anymore, moved among the changing light like someone learning to breathe in a new season. She had taken root in the ranch, quietly, like ivy on old stone. Her hands were never idle. There were always injuries, beasts and men both. The ranchers grew used to her calm. Even the most stubborn of them, the ones who never let a woman stitch their skin, now came to her with hat in hand and blood on their shirt sleeves. She said little. Just cleaned, sutured, and left a quiet thank you in the bandage. She saw less of the cowboy by the week, though not from distance. He was there, on porches, pastures, beside her in evening shadows, but he did not press closer. Nor did she. There was something between them not yet named, and neither seemed ready to call it into the open. What grew wasn't romance, not yet. It was something quieter. A shared stillness. A steadiness. He began bringing her things, books, warm gloves, oil for her boots. Not with ceremony, but as if offering these small kindnesses was the only language he trusted. One morning, he found her in the barn, brushing Sorrel's coat. He stood by the doorway for a moment, then said, "You've made this place softer." She didn't turn. "It was always soft. Just quiet." He stepped inside. Sunlight sliced across his shoulder, dust catching in the air between them. "You're leaving something behind," he said. She looked at him then, unsure if it was a question. "I mean," he added, quieter now, "you're building something new." She nodded. "So are you." Before he could reply, a voice echoed from the road, loud, cheerful, practiced in the art of drawing attention. A man approached on horseback, finely dressed, face too clean for trail riding. The nurse stepped outside as he dismounted. "Well, well," he said, smiling wide. "A war nurse tending sheep? That's not the end I imagined for you." She stiffened. "Elias." He laughed, adjusting his collar. "Don't sound so thrilled. I rode 3 towns to find you. The postmaster in Ellington said you'd taken up with a rancher." The cowboy stepped out behind her, silent. Elias turned toward him with a half-smirk. "This him? The silent savior?" The cowboy said nothing. Elias chuckled. "Charming!" The nurse stepped forward, arms crossed. "Why are you here?" He offered a shrug that felt too rehearsed. "To take you home. I don't have one." He gave a sigh, half pity, half performance. "You could. I have a position in Helena. A medical partnership. Plenty of room for someone like you. You weren't made for this place. For dirt floors and sick goats." The cowboy shifted slightly, arms loose by his sides. She answered without looking back. "And yet here I am." Elias scoffed, walking a slow circle around the yard. "You think this is noble? Playing frontier angel? You belong where people see your worth." "I'm seen." "By whom?" "Him?" Elias motioned with his chin. She didn't reply. The cowboy finally spoke. "If she stays, it won't be for me." Elias gave a dry laugh. "That's convenient." He turned back to her, softer now. "You used to dream big. Cities. Clinics. You said you wanted to change the world." She looked at him then, steady. "I still do. But the world looks different now." Something broke in Elias's expression, confusion maybe, or pride bruised by the quiet refusal. He climbed back into the saddle, boots striking hard against the stirrups. "You're wasting yourself here," he said, not angry, just small. She didn't answer. Just turned and walked into the barn. Elias rode off with dust rising behind him, his silhouette shrinking until even the wind forgot him. The cowboy stood outside, unmoving. When she emerged again, hands dusted with hay, he looked at her, not with pity, but with something sadder, understanding. "You knew him well?" he asked. She nodded once. "Before the war. Before we both learned who we really were." He studied her face for a moment. "You ever miss that version of your life?" She looked out toward the hills, now green at the edges, as if even the mountains were trying to remember something softer. "I miss what I thought I wanted. But not enough to follow it." He stepped closer, not touching her, just letting the space narrow. "What do you want now?" She met his eyes. "I don't know. But I want to find out without someone telling me." He nodded slowly. "Then you'll have that here." The promise hung in the air, not heavy, not binding. Just a breath made solid. That night she sat by the hearth, writing letters to no one. Not to her brother. Not to the man she'd buried in mud and grief. Just to herself, maybe. To the version of her that had survived. She didn't know if the cowboy sat nearby on purpose or out of habit. They shared silence like others shared firelight. It filled the room between them. Eventually, he asked, "Will you stay?" She looked at him. "I mean," he cleared his throat, the only time she'd seen him falter. "Will you stay even if I never ask again?" She smiled faintly. "You don't have to ask." He returned the smile, barely, and rose to tend the fire. In the quiet that followed, she stood, walked to the window, and looked out over the hills. The moon was rising, soft and gold. A breeze carried the scent of lilac from somewhere unexpected. She opened the window, let the air wash over her. From the dark, a new sound emerged, not wind, not horse hooves, but footsteps. Measured. Hesitant. Someone was coming. The storm came without warning, the kind that turned skies yellow before they turned black. It rolled over the hills like a living thing, churning dust and thunder, forcing birds from trees and men from fields. The ranch hands scattered to stable the horses, their yells snatched by wind before they reached the porch. She stood just inside the doorway, watching clouds bruise the sky, her fingers wrapped tight around the frame. He appeared beside her with a lantern and a set jaw. "Barn doors'll hold," he muttered more to himself than her. "But we'll lose shingles if it lasts till morning." She turned to him. "Do you need help? You've done enough today." She didn't move. He hesitated, then handed her the lantern. "You can keep this lit. That's help." They moved through the house together, securing windows, tucking towels beneath old frames that liked to leak when it rained. The world outside howled like it remembered some great sorrow and meant to repeat it. She heard something crash in the yard, a trough maybe, or a fence gate ripped loose. But inside, they worked with quiet rhythm, as if survival had always sounded like this. By nightfall, the storm had thickened into a roar. Rain slammed against the roof with fists of ice. The wind bent trees until their roots groaned. And in the dark of the barn, a foal had been born too early, its mother dead before sunrise. She found him kneeling in the hay, sleeves rolled, arms trembling from effort. The foal was slick with birth, legs too thin, ribs visible like shadows beneath its skin. He didn't look up. "Wasn't due for 2 more weeks." She dropped to her knees beside him. "Still breathing?" "Barely." Together, they worked in silence. She cleared its nostrils, rubbed it dry, placed warm blankets around its fragile frame. He wrapped his hands around its tiny legs and held them as if touch alone could will the colt toward life. Hours passed. The wind dulled, then returned with more fury. She could feel the cold seeping in through the boards. The foal shivered, whined, stilled. She looked at him. "We need to get it inside." He didn't blink. "The others won't like that." "It's not about the others." He carried the foal as if it were glass, through the pelting rain, into the warmth of the house. Hester gave one long look at the creature swaddled in her towels and said nothing, only lit another fire in the parlor and spread quilts over the hearthstones. They took turns watching the foal through the night. She laid beside it, hand resting lightly on its neck. He sat nearby, eyes steady, every so often glancing at her with something unreadable in his expression. "Why did you stay?" he asked once, when the wind had quieted to a whimper. She didn't answer right away. "Because I needed a place where no one expected me to be the version they remembered." He nodded slowly. "That's what I wanted too. When I built this place." She looked over. "You built it for someone?" He took a breath that sounded older than him. "For her. My wife. She died before the walls were up. Consumption took her before I knew what I was doing. I'm sorry." He shrugged. "She was kind. Bright. But I think I built too big a house for 2 people who never spoke the same language." The foal stirred, kicking weakly. She watched the fire catch in his eyes, saw how years had gathered behind them like sediment in a deep stream. "I thought being needed would be enough," he said. "It isn't." He nodded. They sat in silence again, listening to the wind give its last cries against the eaves. When morning came, the storm had spent itself. Branches littered the yard, water pooled at the corners of the porch, but the foal was breathing. Slow, steady. Its legs twitched with dreams. Hester brought coffee. Jasper brought quiet eyes and a broom. The house began to breathe again. Later, the nurse stepped out onto the porch, boots sinking into soft mud. The world was drenched, cleansed in a way that felt both holy and violent. She looked out across the field. The fences were still standing. The land hadn't left them. He joined her, arms crossed, voice soft. "We'll call him Chance." "The foal?" He nodded. She smiled. Good name. The silence between them grew warm. He looked at her, really looked. You're not waiting to be rescued anymore. No, she said. And neither are you. He held her gaze. There was something in his eyes now, not just respect, not just gratitude, but something deeper, something gentler. The beginning of want. But before either of them could speak again, hoofbeats echoed down the lane. She turned sharply. A rider approached from the east, his coat flapping behind him like a flag of memory. As the figure drew closer, her stomach turned. Elias. Again.